Yeah, this is on a knife edge. We're told by senior sources that the recount is happening because Andy Street, the Conservative candidate, has asked for it. Now, last night, both teams, both Labour and Conservatives, were telling us off the record that, look, it was always looking tight, but what they both thought was that Andy Street had just pipped it. The reasoning was that there was a really strong independent candidate here who has picked up votes from Labour, votes from disenchanted voters who are annoyed with Labour's stance on Gaza. Well, that candidate has been doing well in a lot of the results that we've seen, but we've also seen that actually the Labour candidate, Richard Parker, has been doing very, very well. It has been very tense here. The mood has flipped throughout the day. Earlier on, when I was talking to senior Labour sources, they sort of resigned themselves really to, oh, we think we might just not have got it. That has changed, and very tense Tory team here. But of course, this isn't really just about what happens in the West Midlands. The prevailing wisdom was, look, it's been a bad set of local election results, but the Conservatives held the mayoralty up in Teesside. They were more than likely to keep the mayoralty here, and by doing that, Rishi Sunak has done just enough to quell all the rumours of rebels and his backbenchers calling for his head. If Andy Street does not keep this seat, that prevailing wisdom no longer holds.
This is not how today was supposed to play out. An hour after the announcement was meant to have taken place, a recount. So-called bundle checks for all 7 West Midland regions, and for Coventry, a full recount of every vote. It was always going to be close, but the expectation just 24 hours ago from both Labour and the Conservatives, this man, the Labour candidate Richard Parker, was not going to win. His opposition, the Tory incumbent Andy Street, would just hang on. But this evening,
Think it's going to go your way?
Oh my God, normally, right, I would obfuscate even when I knew the result, because that's what we do, and that's fake. I genuinely don't know the answer to this question. This will be the first time I have ever had a returning officer announce something and to have an actual real reaction. It seems to me like it's close, possibly recount. I don't know.
Tories are in the doldrums in the national polls right now. This isn't a natural Tory stronghold. Shouldn't you be walking this?
No, I mean, look, there are a number of different factors that, that have been widely talked about, including the nature of independence and the situation in Gaza, that undoubtedly will have made this harder here. But also,
do you think that could be the deciding factor?
I would be lying if I said it wasn't a problem, but I would also be lying if I said it was the only thing.
And this is the independent candidate so many were predicting could cost Labour a victory.
Good, because the Labour Party have for too long now taken advantage of the inner city areas. They automatically think that people will blindly vote for them. Birmingham City Council is a bankrupt council. Forget about the issues of Gaza, what I have been talking about, spreading awareness about. But Birmingham itself Labour has failed in Birmingham. So yeah, if I've taken votes from them, they deserve it.
But do you think it was because of Labour's response to Gaza that some of their voters might not have turned up for them and turned to you?
Yes, a lot of people who've never voted before voted for me in this election.
This race has never been straightforward. While the Conservatives nationally have been hit hard in the polls, the Tory mayor in West Midlands hasn't suffered as hard. The reason, many believe, a disconnect between the man and the party.
So you've been a lifelong Labour supporter.
That's right, yes, yeah. But Andy Street, I voted for him not because of the Tory party. I consider him as an independent person.
So is an Andy Street win or a Conservative win?
I think it's an Andy Street win, on the strength of his personality and energy, rather than an association with the Conservative Party.
I do vote Conservative.
So you vote Conservative, you voted for Andy Street in the past, but this time round...
No. This time around, I'm not really going down the party lines.
How did you vote?
Well, Andy Street has done a lot of good things, but I couldn't vote for the party.
Tonight, Tories in the West Midlands wait frantically for the fate of their mayor. Tories in Westminster wonder what a loss here might mean for the fate of their Prime Minister.
We can now talk to the Deputy Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, who's in Birmingham. Andrew Mitchell, this result is now long overdue. Is it all gone a bit Pete Tong?
Well, I think it's an open secret that there is a recount going on. So we know that either Andy Street has won or that he has nearly won, because obviously the voting is extremely tight. Andy Street has been an absolutely brilliant mayor for the West Midlands. He's a fantastic example of good Conservative government in action. And obviously I'm very much hoping that the recount will deliver the seat to him.
Right, and so the Tories did ask for the recount. It is you that asked for it.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm allowed to tell you that, but
well, that's a yes then.
There is a recount. There is a recount going on. I can confirm that.
OK, so obviously there are concerns within HQ that, and I noticed you talked about him in the past tense there, that it hasn't quite got his way.
Well, I'm not saying what the result is because I don't know what the result is. That will depend upon the recount. But what I am saying is that the fact that he has either won or nearly won is an extraordinary result for the Conservative Party. This is an area of the country where Labour has to win and win big to get into Downing Street. Okay, and the fact that Andy Street has clearly either won or nearly won is a very significant factor for the Conservative Party.
It does take quite some chutzpah to describe a defeat as a nearly win. But, I mean, if he does nearly win, as you put it, or loses, as other people might put it, that's pretty catastrophic for Rishi Sunak, isn't it? And will revive speculation from his plotters about his leadership.
Well, if you look at the polls nationally, and you notice that Andy Street has done many times as well as those polls suggest, this is a real election. It's not an opinion poll. That suggests that those who have already cast what the result of the next election will be will have to think again. And what I'm saying is that the brilliant mayor that we've had in the West Midlands has shown conservatism in action. And when you move from the politics of protest to the politics of choice, people, I think, when the general election comes, will be making a very different decision.
Right, so what do you say to the plotters who are circling right now and waiting for that result, and if it doesn't go the way you want, which sounds very much like it might not, they will revive that speculation as soon as they get back to Westminster?
Well, I read in the newspaper that the plotters have decided to pull behind the Prime Minister.
That was this morning when this looked in the bag.
Well, I think it was yesterday, actually, but I think that that's very good news if that is the case. I think to do anything other than support the Prime Minister would be self-indulgence of a very high order indeed. And it's clear that there will be an election coming up quite soon. We all need to get behind the Prime Minister and deliver on his plan. And I think it's worth making the point that on all these big issues, the Prime Minister and the Conservative government do have a plan. I don't see any plan at all in what Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are saying. They're just hoping to carry the vase across the slippery floor and get to number 10, saying as little as possible at the general election. I don't think it works like that.
OK, you've praised Andy Street to the hilt. He's your kind of Conservative, a one-nation Conservative, very much on the centre ground, and he describes himself that way as well. Some of your colleagues say, and they will redouble these calls if the result is close, so they'll redouble these calls anyway, they're saying that the party should adopt a sort of harder-edged, harder-nosed, more right-wing conservatism. What do you say to that suggestion?
Well, the Conservative Party is a broad church, and I am very fond of my colleagues on the right of the party who take a slightly different view to me, but we're all Conservatives, and we're all determined to win the next election, and that's why I am sure we will all be supporting the Prime Minister. As we come towards that election, we need to pull together and deliver on his plan.
Andrew Mitchell, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that's the West Midlands, and very tense it is too. But now let's turn to the mayoral races in London and Manchester. In a moment, we'll speak to Minnie Stevenson in London. But first to our North of England correspondent, Claire Fallon in Manchester, where Labour's Andy Burnham has won a third term. Claire.
A third term, yes, with a big majority. But Andy Burnham's win here, while not at all being a surprise, did see his share of the vote reduce, and I'll come back to that in a few moments. We've also had results today in the mayoral elections in the Liverpool City region, West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, where the Labour Metro mayors have all been voted back in, and they've all increased their share of the vote. Another thing that's of interest in the result over on Merseyside today, the Greens almost beat the Tories into second place. And in the local elections across England, the Green Party now has a record number of seats, more than 800. But back to the result here in Manchester today for the Metro Mayor of Greater Manchester. Andy Burnham back in for a third term. But as I say, although he is probably the most high profile, the most well-known of the Metro mayors, his vote share did go down, not as big a win as it was last time. And so the story of Labour gains has not been repeated everywhere, with the party's position over Gaza seen as being a key factor in some areas. That's one of the things I asked Andy Burnham about earlier, just after his win had been announced.
It's an emphatic endorsement of what we're doing in Greater Manchester, the change we're bringing here, the fact that we're growing faster as a city region than the UK economy. I take it as a kind of huge endorsement of not just what I'm doing, but what all of us here in Greater Manchester are doing.
Your vote share's down. Why do you think that is?
It's only a little bit, to be honest, but it is a little down. I think, the coming out of the pandemic and some of the things that happened here in the pandemic maybe sort of, brought
King
me
of the North
over to people in a way that, perhaps is not what you get in more normal times.
I mean, you say that your vote share was only down by a bit, but that is in the context of other places where Labour are seeing these huge increases in their vote. Do you think Gaza was a factor?
I think it undeniably was. There's no point in saying otherwise. I won every ward in Greater Manchester in 2021. I won every ward but one in this election. So,
and that one had Gaza as a factor, didn't it?
I think so, yes. And there's no point in saying not. And I heard it on the doorstep. I heard the hurt in the Muslim community and in our Jewish community, because pretty much unlike anywhere else in England outside of London, we are a city region that has a large Muslim community and a large Jewish community. I said something in my speech that I really want to come back to. I see it as my job not to do what other politicians are doing these days, picking sides in culture wars and sort of, almost like kind of arguing the toss every day on social media. As mayor, it's really important that I do my best to understand and represent all of our communities and try and bring them into dialogue and bring them together. And that's a critically important part of my role.
Just one other local council result to tell you about that we've had this afternoon from Warrington, so not too far away from here, where the Tories have been all but wiped out on the local council, going from 10 seats to just 1.
Wow. Claire, thanks very much for joining us. Well, Labour's Sadiq Khan has also won an historic third term as London Mayor. And despite a Conservative campaign attacking his expansion of London's ultra-low emission zone, many areas saw a swing to Labour. Minnie Stevenson is at City Hall in London for us. Minnie.
Yes, Cathy, as you say, a historic win for Sadiq Khan, who's won by a bigger majority than he's ever won by before. And in many areas of London, there has been a swing to Labour. Now, if you were to believe the internet last night, then both sides were actually saying a lot of chatter about, this being too close to call, with some even saying that Susan Hall, the Conservative candidate, could win in a dramatic victory. But actually what happened was there was a lot of analysis, and it seems to be that in the outer London boroughs, actually, they tend to normally vote Tory, and the turnout was a lot higher, whereas in the inner London boroughs that tend to vote for Sadiq Khan, the turnout was lower. So there was anxiety around that. There was also a strong sense that Sadiq Khan, who has been expanding the ULEZ, which has been very unpopular with people, would mean he was punished at the polls. But instead, he actually won in some areas where he has never won before for Labour in a mayoral election. And about an hour ago, he took to the stage to claim his victory. And I have to say, there was a huge amount of tension in the air. He was booed by some of his opponents, as Sadiq Khan said that some of his rivals had run a divisive campaign, and he threw forward to the general election.
For the last 8 years, London has been swimming against the tide of a Tory government. And now, with a Labour Party that's ready to govern again under Keir Starmer, it's time for Rishi Sunak to give the public a choice. A general election will not just pave the path to a new direction for our country, but it will make bold action Londoners want to see a reality.
Now, there was also an anxiety that Sadiq Khan would be punished in the polls for Labour's wider foreign policy, in particular Sir Keir Starmer's stance on Israel. But instead, he has won by a majority across the board here. And there are, in fact, tonight, people asking questions in the Conservative Party why Susan Hall was chosen as a Liz Truss-loving Donald Trump fan in Labour-leaning London. So tonight, Sadiq Khan celebrates a historic victory.
Minnie, thanks very much.